February 20th, 1944. Before the sun can find the English hedgerows, men climb into cold aluminum because the factories on the map are not the real target. The pilots waiting above Germany are. Point Blank has been hammering the same idea for months. If Overlord is going to happen in June, the skies must be bent to our will now. That means the Luftwaffe's day fighter force has to be drawn up and bled. Not once, not twice, but until experience itself, those hands that know the climb rate by feel and the deflection by instinct, runs out. Jimmy Doolittle has changed the rules to make it possible. No more tight leashes on the escorts. The P-51 Mustangs, the P-47D Thunderbolts, the P-38J Lightnings can range out ahead, free hunting for interceptors. The bombers, the B-17Gs and B-24s stacked in frosted combat boxes, are the bait that no proud defender can ignore. Subscribe to What If Wars for more stories that change how we see history. The English airfields crackle to life in the black hour when breath hangs like smoke and boots ring on perforated steel. There's the smell of high octane and damp canvas, the rasp of gloved hands over canopy rails, the clatter of tools returning to chests. Engine starters whine and cough. Superchargers answer with a hard metallic hum that fills the ribs and mask. From Italy, on the other side of the dark, the 15th Air Force turns South Country dawn into a ladder of contrails as crews in leather jackets trace their route to Regensburg and beyond. Between England and Italy, a pair of open doors into the same room. And when night comes, RAF Bomber Command will step through and keep the pressure on so that morning never arrives to a rested enemy. Weather hangs low and mean. The clouds have weight, and the weight is on the men. Frost makes a thin skin on wings, and ground crews sweep it off with stiff brooms while officers talk into phones under bare bulbs. An armorer checks the feed on a Mustang's P-50s and pulls the belt once more just to be sure. A navigator in a fortress whispers numbers that turn to white steam in the cold. To the east, over towns and rail yards where names like Leipzig, Brunswick, Gotha, and Oschersleben wait, there are men who have done this 100 times, who know the climb line through the gray and the moment you commit nose high and cannot take it back. They are the real targets, not the buildings, not the girders, not the walls that can be rebuilt. It's easy to say factories, harder to say what factories mean. A building can be dispersed, an assembly line split, a jig rebuilt in a barn or a tunnel, but the way a Staffelkapitan holds the turn without bleeding speed, the way a Rottenführer slides his wing just enough to keep a Mustang in the corner of his eye, the way a leader decides in a half second to go head-on through a combat box because altitude and honor say he must, that cannot be mass-produced by decree. That has to be lived, flown, survived, repeated until the body knows before the mind speaks. Big Week is about using steel to spend something Germany cannot print more of by spring. Across dispersal, a pilot with a lucky coin in his glove closes the canopy and feels the cockpit become a small world. The oxygen mask peels the warmth from his breath. The radio brings a thin chorus, engines hot, oils in the green, taxi on the flare path, little phrases that make a giant machine of many hands. The formation rolls, tail wheels rise, the earth lets go. A band of pale light opens over the North Sea like a wound, and the bombers stack into their comb geometry, silver teeth set against the morning. Mustangs and Thunderbolts weave along the edges, then slide forward and up, climbing into the cold blue where trails begin. Somewhere in Italy, Liberators are already thin dark commas against a whitewashed mountain rib, and a Lightning's twin booms carve a neat V into the cloud. There's a rhythm to what's coming, deliberate as a metronome. By day, the 8th from England and the 15th from Italy. By night, the RAF. By day again, the escorts outside the box, playing offense, breaking the habit of waiting. The aim is to force the Luftwaffe to answer every bell, to scramble from fields stamped into frozen ground, to climb into the sun with fuel tanks short and courage long, and to lose the one thing they cannot replace in time. Men who have already learned the hard parts. Big Week will look on paper like factories under bomb symbols, but it will feel in the air like a hunt. You do not break a backbone with blueprints. You do it by taking away the hands that hold the spine together. A waist gunner in a B-17 watches the frost crawl away from the glass as the sun finally bites, counts the ribs on his own gloves to keep the nerves steady, and tries not to think about the moment a black cross will be just big enough to aim at. A flight lead in a Mustang checks his watch against the briefed rendezvous, then pushes a little farther out than habit would allow last month, because the order now is simple: find them first, hit them first, do not let them reset. On a German field, a mechanic smears oil on his sleeve and bangs a reluctant cowling shut. There is a sound like distant thunder, and it keeps getting closer. We are at the start line of 6 days that will measure strategy and human currency. The maps say buildings, the plan says pilots. Watch what happens when those two truths collide. We will count the days not by chimneys falling, but by empty chairs at debrief, by names that do not answer the phone, by the way spring will arrive to quieter radios and easier crossings for ships that have not yet sailed. This is the promise. Across these 6 days, the Luftwaffe's day fighter backbone will crack, not from smashed roofs, but from the empty seats no one can fill. February 20th gives way to mid-morning light, and the first test of the trap glints over the heart of Germany. Leipzig is not just a name, it's engines and gears and the rails that feed them. Brunswick is a nerve cluster, where parts cross paths like blood through an artery. Gotha and Oschersleben are where aluminum becomes contours, where fixtures turn into airframes. Hit these and the sirens will pull men from ready rooms because they must. Ignore them, and you concede the spring. The bomb lines bend toward those places as if drawn by wire, and the escorts, freed by Doolittle's new gospel, no longer hover like anxious shepherds. They slip ahead into the cold, looking for the moment when black crosses detach from cloud and climb. The combat boxes hold steady, layered teeth in a sky that bites. Contrails braid into ladders and then into curtains, tall and pale. The B-17s look inevitable from a distance, but inside the aluminum, the world is cramped, loud, and brittle at the edges. The waist gunner, who counted glove ribs at dawn, now watches a bright point swell on the horizon, a speck becoming a threat becoming a shape. Head-on passes are the hardest test of nerve in this war. No room to fake, no room to soften. Just two wills rushing together and trusting tracers to curve truth. He plants his feet, swings the gun on its arc, hears the interphone crackle, and tastes metal behind his tongue. Far out on the left of the stream, a flight of P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group peels upward through sunshot haze. The Thunderbolts are heavy with presence and thick with firepower, and today they aren't waiting for permission to bite. Their brief is a fence, range ahead, find the climb lanes that German fighters must use, and cut them. They skim the top of the bomber altitudes, then skate higher until the world sounds thin and every breath is a measured act. Below and to the east, another handoff ticks on schedule. Lightning to Mustang, Thunderbolt to Mustang, because the P-51B can push deeper and linger longer. A few minutes later, the 4th Fighter Group streaks past, noses pointed at a sun that keeps moving away, and the radio fills with quick numbers and clipped bearings that mean someone just saw what everyone's been waiting for. A German flight leader levels his eyes at the contrail wall and knows the math is bad, but the choice is fixed. There is no prestige in staying down when the factory smokestacks draw circles on the board and the phones won't stop ringing. Fuel is tighter than he'd like, and the engines have that winter reluctance, but he calls the commit anyway because the country demands it and his men watch his hands. They angle for the head-on because it is fast and clean if you get it right, and because climbing into the sun at a slant might bring the P-47s crashing down on your back. He steadies his wingman with a small tilt, breathes once through the rubber, and rides the throttle to the gate. The bomber stream becomes a corridor of force and fear. A fortress in the low right box starts counting seconds to bomb run over Oschersleben, while the top box takes the first hammer blows. Tracers write quick parabolas across the nose. Fragments tap the skin like thrown gravel. The waist gunner's world narrows to a ring sight and a black cross that swells until it is absurdly large and then impossibly gone. A streak and a smell and a shake that feels like it shifted the bones in the ship. The interphone barks, check the right waist, check the tail, and then the voice of someone who can't quite believe it. Fighters high, 2 o'clock, diving fast. The Mustangs are already moving. A 2-ship from the 357th Fighter Group slides off the escort line like a blade slipping cleanly from a sheath. The flight lead taps a boot, and the wingman hangs just where he needs to be, a small diamond of trust in a huge sky. They don't shout. They don't need to. The interceptors have to climb to get angles for the head-on against the boxes, and that climb draws a simple diagram in the air, energy rising, speed falling. The Mustangs meet them in that thin top layer where choices get sticky. The first bounce is all surprise and geometry. There's the shape, there's the angle, here's the shot. A short burst, a flicker of flame behind a cowling, a piece of skin panels lifting like a flap of paper in wind. The wingman checks high right. The lead rolls off and resets, and the space that held a veteran a breath ago is empty. Leipzig's rail yards, Brunswick's sheds, Gotha's lines, Oschersleben's works. Each name forces the Luftwaffe up again and again. The 56th roams the climbs, catching pairs before they can stack. The 4th hunts the high perches. The 357th slips between sun and cloud, turning profiles into targets. It costs. A fortress falls slow and burning, trying to hold formation for an extra second that no longer exists. A Thunderbolt limps west with a cylinder gone, and a pilot whispering to a machine like a friend who's fading. The German leader who committed finds his elements scattered, one man streaming, one lost in the melee, and he looks for that spot where discipline and instinct used to align without thinking. He goes back in anyway. By late day, the arithmetic is ugly paper for both sides, and something different in the air. The bombers that make the turn have holes like constellations, but the head-on attacks are thinner on the ride home. The radio reports feel colder, more clinical, as if everyone is learning the same lesson in real time. When escorts fight forward, the interceptors pay before they reach the boxes. Factories will be listed in the communiques tonight, but the thing that sticks is the missing call signs. The empty hooks on a German dispersal wall where a flight hung their gear that morning. The trap isn't clean, and it isn't kind, but it's sprung. Tomorrow the map adds more names, the weather might turn, and the cost will keep climbing. Yet inside the cost, there's a new shape. Kill tallies rising on the very fighters sent to guard the bait. The tide does not turn in a single hour. It tilts. Today, it tilted. February 22nd arrives under a sky that can't make up its mind. The morning opens with a lid of gray laid tight across England, and the briefers who drew clean arrows last night redraw them with erasers. Weather is not a wall, it's a maze. Flights shuffle, altitudes change, time on target slides. The men sit on their parachutes in idling aircraft, watching a windsock argue with itself. Then a gap appears over the channel, like a door cracked just enough, and the order moves down the line. Go. The climb feels heavier when the clouds sit thick. The contrails smear instead of braid, and even the engines sound a half-tone lower, as if the sky is swallowing some of their voice. The first hour is a parade of edits. A box peels off and reforms. A P-38J pair from a forward field in England connects late and has to sprint to their gate, the twin boom shapes cutting wet chalk lines into blue that won't hold. The P-47Ds muscle upward to cover until Mustangs can take the baton. On the radios, the cadence is slower than yesterday, but the content is the same. Eyes up, watch the climb lanes, don't let them build speed before they strike. The target board still points at the same nerves. Lines that feed engines, fixtures that define wings, junctions that turn raw things into ordered ones. But the weather makes everything personal. A navigator in a B-24 wipes drizzle off his plotting board and tries to steady the numbers while the aircraft rides a small, endless sea. A waist gunner who slept badly pushes down a coil of fear and resets his routine. Scan high, then low, check the arc, count the rounds by habit so he doesn't have to count by hope. Somewhere under the blanket, Germany listens. Scramble horns echo off wet concrete. A staffel forms ragged and climbs into a layered world where visibility shifts with every breath. The escorts don't wait at the edge. The 4th Fighter Group finds a slit of sunlight and slides into it like a blade, using the columns of weather as cover. Free hunt feels different in cloud country. You move by shapes and glimpses, and you trust the rhythm in your wingman's position more than the horizon. A Mustang's canopy beads with moisture, then clears as it noses through to bright. There, a pair of black crosses climbing hard through a lighter band, angling for the head-on. The lead gives the slightest wing dip, and the team becomes an arrow. They don't chase, they intersect. The first burst is short and disciplined, a reminder that this is geometry before it's emotion. One interceptor tumbles and lights. The other dives for weather that will hide him but also rob him of options. The Mustangs break clean and climb again, not to escort a box, but to deny a sky. The 15th Air Force feels all of this at a slant. Down from Italy, daylight grows from pink to white on mountain ribs, and the air is cold and thin in ways that have nothing to do with England's damp. Regensburg is written in thick letters on the board because it bends production the way a lever bends a load. Liberators push across snow-scratched country toward a city that has seen this before and will see it again by sundown. German fighters have to decide, turn north to face the 8th or south to catch the 15th. Some try to do both and lose time doing either. A lightning element noses out front and hangs there, nose shimmering with heat, waiting for the first climb threads to cross. When they do, the fight is short and ugly. A P-38's guns talk from the center line. A German pilot rolls hard and for a moment finds the perfect angle, then loses it as two more Mustangs drop from the sun like a footnote rewritten into a headline. Night is not rest. When the day's last bombers limp home over the North Sea, RAF Bomber Command leans into the dark. The engines sound different at night, a lower, steadier ocean that floods the edges of towns and fields. On a German line shack, a mechanic stands outside with a mug he cannot finish because the air smells like petrol and fear and the faint iron tang of cordite, and he can hear the drone building from the west. He thinks about the morning scramble and who didn't come back. He thinks about the men he will see at dawn and the men he won't. He goes inside and checks a spark plug that didn't need checking, because doing is better than counting. February 23rd. Breaks open cleaner, the clouds lift. The lines on the brief stay where the pencils place them, and the speed of the day increases. The bomber stream looks orderly from far away. Inside, you can feel the nerves humming under the discipline. A B-17G crew runs their hands over the same switches in the same sequence, and it's almost soothing until the first contrails appear where no bombers should be. The call, Bandits High, 2 o'clock, sounds almost routine now, which is the strangest thing of all, because nothing about what follows is routine. The 357th Fighter Group is already moving. A 2-ship ranges out, holds the bounce a second longer than they did yesterday because the light makes the angles cleaner, then drops. One short burst rocks a canopy with reflected flash. A second burst makes a small dark dot peel away and fall, and the wingman's eyes track for the parachute that doesn't bloom. By afternoon, the weather that made the 22nd a maze becomes a mirror. The pattern that command hoped for shows itself in the air. The more the escorts fight forward, the more the interceptors pay before they can organize. Factories will be patched, rail lines rerouted, production shifted to sheds and tunnels. But the men who do the hard parts in the hard seconds are being spent. You can feel it not in the communiques, which will still list buildings and tonnage, but in the small human evidence. Fewer head-on passes sustained to the bitter end. More broken climbs, more German fields closing with a silence that wasn't there last week. At dusk on the 23rd, an English dispersal scratches with the sound of cooling metal. A pilot sits on a wing root and looks at a dent in his spinner the size of a fist, and thinks about the hand that almost made it bigger. In Italy, ground crews wrestle canvas onto tired machines before the mountain cold steals their fingers. In Germany, a ready room has 3 chairs filled and 1 left empty without anyone telling it to be. The 24-hour squeeze is no slogan tonight. It is the way the air itself has begun to lean against a force that cannot straighten quickly enough. Factories can stand up again. Empty seats cannot. Tomorrow will say the same thing, louder. February 24th, 1944. Dawn lifts like a curtain and the stage is already crowded. Augsburg sits where the rivers braid. Regensburg glows on planning boards like a hot coal. And the lines to Fürth and Stuttgart look like veins a surgeon can't ignore. If you aim at these, men will launch to stop you even if fuel is tight, even if yesterday has not yet left their bones. The bombers rise into their layered geometry. The contrails stack, and the escorts don't wait for the first cry. They're already out front, hunting the climb lanes, turning the sky itself into an ambush. A pair of Mustangs rides the bright edge over Bavaria, engine notes taut and clean. The leader holds a shallow weave that makes space for options. The wingman's eyes never leave the corners, because that's where surprises live. Below, the bomber stream advances like a slow river of mirrors. Ahead, tiny scratches in the air angle upward, German fighters gathering the altitude they need for a head-on. The Mustangs step off the line, the way a wolf steps off a ridge, unhurried and inevitable. No calls for help, no orders barked. The geometry is permission enough. They meet the interceptors on the slope, where speed is most precious and hands are busiest. The first burst is not long, it's correct. A call smokes, then flames, a canopy flashes, a dark shape slips sideways and tumbles. The wingman checks high and left, ready for the second pair that is always just out of sight. South of the Danube, a flight of P-47s catches a formation, trying to sprint around the flank. The Thunderbolts are blunt instruments when they have to be, and scalpels when they can be. Today they are something in between. They drag a fight down the ladder, forcing the Germans to spend altitude they cannot afford. A 190 overshoots, and a quick mean burst sends pieces lifting from the wing like tin leaves. The radio is busy, but not frantic. The discipline of free hunt has combined with the hunger from 2 long days, and the result feels like a net tightening a notch. On the ground, ready rooms in Germany have fewer voices. JG-26 answers the bell because it always does. JG-3 forms on the edge of fatigue because it must. A Staffelkapitan, who has survived since France, knows the map better than his sleep, and yet his brief is simpler than it has ever been. Climb, break the stream, keep the boxes from the run. He glances at the board. Too many names have chalk lines through them. The new pilots are eager and good with checklists. They are not yet good with seconds. He sets his jaw and leads them into a sky where the old instincts are still true, but the margin for using them has thinned. Firth comes up under the nose like a gray patchwork of roofs and rails. The bombing run is straight as a promise and just as brittle. Tracers rake the gaps between boxes. A B-24 shudders as flak walks across the wing, and the pilot holds it level with hands that shake and do not care. In the top cover, a lightning pair rides herd on a climbing foursome that has the angle to ruin everything. The twin booms descend in a shallow scythe, the first burst cutting the lead free of his own prop wash, the second carving just enough chaos that the attack loses its timing. The boxes release, the bombs fall in a clean, terrible line, and the escorts climb again, not to shepherd home, but to tear at the next intercept. By afternoon, the fights string together into one long roar punctuated by moments of clean silence. Stuttgart flares on the horizon, smoke pillars twisting into wind, and the air above it turns into stacked, overlapping circles of men trying to read one another's intentions at 400 miles an hour. A Mustang from the 4th rolls out of a diving break and finds himself canopy to canopy with a 109 for the length of a heartbeat. Both pilots see the same future and refuse it. They split, choose opposite answers to the same question, and live another minute. A section from the 357th slips in high and catches a pair rolling into their attack. The first German goes in trailing, and the second tries to climb away into a slice of sun that will not save him. In a different corner of the sky, JG-26's remnant holds a line that looks brave on paper and desperate in the cockpit. February 25th starts sharper, colder, and somehow quieter, the way a music hall feels before the conductor lifts his hands. Augsburg and Regensburg again, because repetition is a weapon when the other side is running out of people who have seen this exact picture. Stuttgart's outer airfields cough smoke and resolve. JG-3 puts up what it can. The first intercept is late, the second is rushed, and the third arrives as the escorts drop out of the sun, with the confidence that only comes when patterns become habits. Somewhere over the Swabian Alb, a furball expands in a white flower, petals made of turns and climbs and dives. And inside that mess, the most experienced men find each other by instinct, as if gravitating to the hardest work. The numbers will be argued in offices, but in cockpits the shape is plain. Across the week, the Luftwaffe's day fighter force is bleeding out its veterans, on the order of hundreds of fighters and roughly 100 of the men who know the hard parts best. American bombers have paid dearly, more than 200 by some counts, closer to 350, but the exchange is finally attached to the strategy it was designed to serve. Factories will be patched and moved and hidden. Empty chairs and briefing huts will not fill with the same kind of experience by spring. Late light washes the concrete of a German dispersal and reveals the scuffed boot prints of a flight that did not return. A mechanic ties down a tarp that doesn't need tying because it keeps his hands from being useless. In England, a pilot wipes oil from a wing root with a rag that used to be a scarf and stares through his reflection in the metal at nothing in particular. In Italy, a crew chief leans his forehead against a warm cowling and lets the heat soak into bone. Breath hangs pale in oxygen masks. Radios mutter and go still. The crews move slower, not because they want to, but because they've spent what they had for the day. This is what victory looks like when it's paid in minutes and names, breath frosting and masks, fatigue as victory's price. February 25th fades, and what remains is not a map of broken roofs, but a ledger of missing men. In the quiet after engines, the arithmetic settles. Germany can disperse assembly lines to sheds and tunnels, move jigs to forests, reroute rail around craters. It can summon metal and will. What it cannot summon by spring is the instinct that keeps a wing from stalling at the top of a climb, the poise to time, a head-on pass through a corridor of tracers, the calm to pick one target out of a frantic sky and commit without flinch. The factories will breathe again. The cockpit seats left empty this week will not. The briefings in England and Italy start to sound different. Crews still study flak belts and dogleg routes, still trace fingers over names, Leipzig, Brunswick, Gotha, Oschersleben, Regensburg, Augsburg, Stuttgart. But the tone in the room has shifted from bracing to steady. The escorts know the pattern now. Push out, cut the climb lanes, break the attack before it ever becomes a formation roaring at the boxes. The Mustang flight leads carry themselves with a quiet that isn't bravado, just recognition. The free hunt works because it starves the interceptors of their best pilots first. The Thunderbolt drivers wear fatigue like a second jacket and still volunteer for another go. The Lightning men talk less and check more. Everyone learns to live with a new kind of silence, the silences that used to be filled by names at roll call. Across the lines, the Luftwaffe's day fighter force looks the same until it speaks. Aircraft still roll, formations still form, but the edges are frayed. A Staffelkapitan, who has carried his unit through years, stands before a chalkboard that feels too clean. He writes tomorrow's plan and sees the gap where an ace used to sit, the space where a steady hand kept a hothead from burning his fuel in the first minute of the climb. Young pilots step up with bright eyes and hard work. They will be good. They will not be ready in time. The instructors who could have made them ready were in the air this week, paying the same price as everyone else. There are numbers that will live in reports, and there are truths that only live in memory. On paper, hundreds of German fighters gone, something like 100 seasoned day fighter pilots dead or captured. On paper, American bombers counted out in the low hundreds, by some counts far more. In the air, what mattered was the curve, how each day made the next easier for the escorts and harder for the interceptors. By the end, head-on attacks were rarer, climb-outs more tentative, break-offs earlier, the defensive web thinner. You can't see that in a photograph. You can hear it in a radio that stays quiet a beat longer than it used to. Spring is close enough to smell in the damp hedgerows. On the south coast of England, ships gather in secret and in plain sight, the way tides gather. Overlord needs a sky that forgives mistakes and punishes late arrivals. Big Week was the down payment. It didn't end production. It ended the idea that experience would be there to contest every crossing. When June comes, the air above the beaches will be different because February took away the men who could make it otherwise. The factories that survived the bombs cannot climb into a cockpit and turn the fight back. None of this feels like triumph when you sit on a wing route and wait for 3 planes that will not taxi in. None of it feels clean when you walk past a German dispersal at dusk in your mind and picture the coffee cup that will cool untouched. Strategy isn't noble for being efficient. It is only honest. Big Week said out loud what war often implies. Break the backbone you cannot rebuild. It used buildings to draw out pilots and then took the pilots. It hurt on both sides. It shortened some futures so that others could land in June. The week ends the way battles end in the air, not with a flag on a ridge, but with a change in what people dare. A Mustang taxiing in on fumes, a Thunderbolt coughing once and going quiet, a Lightning crew chief resting his head on warm metal as if to hear the engine's last thoughts, a German mechanic straightening a tool bench that won't be busy tomorrow. The sky looks the same. The sky is not the same. The content of this video is compiled from multiple sources. If anything needs correction or clarification, please leave a comment below. See you next time.